The Galactic Dominion had ruled the stars for thousands of years, crushing every enemy that dared to challenge its might. The Vorkesh, the elite hunters of the Dominion, had never failed a mission. Their warships, sleek and deadly, prowled the galaxy in search of threats, erasing them before they could grow. To them, humans were nothing more than a minor nuisance, an inferior species that had only recently stepped into the vastness of space. Reports claimed humans were adaptable, unpredictable, and stubborn, but that didn't matter to the Vorkesh. In the end, every species broke under the Dominion's power. And so, when a single human vessel was detected drifting through an ancient forbidden sector, they considered it nothing more than an opportunity for amusement. Commander Zorvek stood on the bridge of his warship, arms crossed behind his back, as he watched the holographic display of the lone human ship. It was small, barely armed, and barely worth their attention. A pathetic excuse for a vessel. He allowed himself a smirk. "Send a warning," he ordered. "Tell the creature to surrender, or we will take them by force." The communication officer obeyed, sending a standard transmission in the crude human language. But something was strange. Instead of responding, the human ship remained eerily silent. Its engines flickered, its systems dimmed, and then, before their eyes, it simply vanished from their scanners. A murmur spread across the bridge. Ships didn't just disappear, not from Dominion scanners. Their technology was the most advanced in the galaxy. Cloaking fields existed, but none could hide a ship this completely. Zorvak narrowed his eyes. "Increase scanner range. Find them." The officers scrambled to obey, but as they worked, a chilling realization spread across the fleet. Their ships were no longer alone. One of the Dominion vessels let out a distress call. "Unknown contact, shields failing. We are under ATA, the transmission cut off." A moment later, the ship was gone, its massive presence erased as if it had never been there. The remaining warships scrambled, engines flaring as they repositioned, trying to get a visual on their enemy. Zorvek's heart pounded, but he forced himself to remain calm. A single human vessel couldn't do this. It was impossible. A bold laugh broke the tension as one of his captains spoke through the fleet's communication channel. "Cowardly creature," the captain sneered. "It ran the moment it saw us. Let it run." There was a silence, then a voice crackled through their comms, sending a shiver through every soul aboard the fleet. "I wasn't running." The voice was calm, cold, devoid of fear. And before anyone could process the meaning of those words, another Dominion warship erupted in flames. It didn't explode from outside fire. It imploded as if something had torn through its very core, ripping it apart from within. Panic spread like wildfire. "Shields to maximum." Someone shouted, "Identify the target." Another voice barked. But nothing they did made a difference. Their sensors remained blind. Their scanners, designed to detect the smallest anomalies in the universe, saw nothing. The human was there, somewhere in the darkness, but it moved unseen, striking with precision, eliminating the fleet one ship at a time. Zorvek gritted his teeth, fury battling with fear. Enough of this. All ships fall into defensive formation. The Dominion warships pulled together, forming an unbreakable wall of firepower. No matter what trick the human was using, it couldn't survive against the full force of the fleet. They activated their pulse scanners, flooding the space around them with energy waves that should have revealed any hidden vessel. But there was nothing. Then a whisper came over the comms. "You should never run from a human." Zorvek's blood turned cold. The hunter forced the elite warriors of the Dominion, the ones who never failed, were being hunted. He turned to his second-in-command. "We need to land," he said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "Find the nearest planetary body. If we cannot see our enemy in space, then we will force them to fight us on solid ground." It was a desperate move, but it was their only option. The navigators located a planet nearby, an ancient and uncharted world lost in the depths of the sector. Within minutes, the surviving Dominion ships descended into its atmosphere, their hulls glowing from the friction of re-entry. The landscape below was barren, filled with crumbling ruins, remnants of a civilization long forgotten. Towering stone structures, worn by time, stood like silent guardians over the desolate land. Strange carvings covered the wall's symbols that none of the Dominion scholars could recognize. The warships touched down, their soldiers spilling out in formation, weapons at the ready. The air was thick with tension. Something about the place felt wrong. It was too quiet, too still. The only sound was the crackling of their damaged ships cooling in the wind. One of the warriors activated a scanning drone, sending it forward to map the ruins. The moment it passed beneath a towering archway, it shut down. The lights on its hull flickered, and then it collapsed, lifeless. A deep sense of unease spread among the soldiers. Something was here, watching them. Zorvek stepped forward, his boots crunching against the ancient stone. His gaze fell upon a massive carving etched into the ruins. It depicted a battle, a war so ancient that even Dominion records held no mention of it. The warriors in the carving were not Dominion, nor any race he recognized. They stood against overwhelming numbers, facing monstrous enemies with nothing but their weapons and sheer will. And in every scene, standing at the center of the war, was a human. Zorvek's breathing slowed. The truth was beginning to take shape in his mind, and it terrified him. This was no ordinary human they were facing. This was something else. Something old. A sound broke the silence. Footsteps. Measured. Unhurried. The soldiers turned, weapons raised, forming a defensive line. The figure emerged from the darkness of the ruins, stepping into the dim light of the Dominion warships. The armor was dark, battle-scarred, and human. The soldiers didn't wait. They fired. The energy blasts streaked through the air, but the figure moved before they could land a shot, vanishing like a shadow. A heartbeat later, screams echoed through the ruins as the first soldier fell. Then another. And another. The Vorkesh, the hunters, the feared warriors of the Dominion, were being picked off one by one. Zorvek's hands tightened around his weapon, his mind racing for a solution. But deep down, he knew the truth. They had made a mistake, a terrible, irreversible mistake. They had thought they were the predators. But they had never been the hunters in this battle. And as he turned, his breath caught in his throat. The human was there, standing in front of him, blade gleaming in the dim light. Their voice was calm, almost gentle. You should never run from a human. Because we never stop hunting. Zorvek barely had time to react before darkness swallowed everything. Zorvek gasped, his vision blurring as he staggered backward. His breathing was uneven, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. The human was gone. The figure had stood before him only moments ago, whispering those chilling words, but now there was nothing. The ruins around him stretched into the darkness, their towering structures casting long, eerie shadows under the dim glow of his warship's emergency lights. The air felt heavy, thick with something unseen yet suffocating. The Dominion had landed on this planet for safety, but the moment their boots touched the ground, it had become a graveyard. The screams of his soldiers had stopped, but that silence was even worse. He activated his communicator, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his throat. Status report. I want a head count. Now. His command was met with static. The encrypted Dominion frequency, one that no known enemy could interfere with, was dead. He turned to his second-in-command, but the officer was already on the ground, his lifeless eyes staring at the sky. A clean wound sliced across his throat, but there was no blood. Zorvek clenched his jaw. This was not normal warfare. This was something else. Something ancient. He moved carefully, his boots crunching against the cracked stone of the ruins. His remaining warriors, once confident and unshakable, were now wide-eyed, their fingers twitching over their weapons. They were trained to fight armies, not ghosts. One of the soldiers, a younger warrior named Rethor, swallowed hard and whispered, "Commander, what are we fighting?" His voice was barely above a breath, as if speaking too loudly would invite death itself. Zorvek didn't answer. He didn't know. Then, the shadows moved. It was subtle at first, a flicker at the edge of vision. A shape shifting through the darkness, too fast, too fluid. Then another, and another. The warriors spun, raising their weapons, but there was nothing to shoot at. The ruins around them were alive, shifting and breathing with unseen figures. Zorvek's instincts screamed at him, "Run," but he crushed the thought. He was Dominion. He was a hunter, not prey. Yet, as he took a step forward, something cold brushed past him. It wasn't just an enemy hiding in the dark. It was something much worse. A soldier behind him let out a sharp cry, his body twisting unnaturally before collapsing to the ground. His armor was untouched, his weapon still in his grip, but his face was frozen in a silent scream. The others panicked, opening fire in every direction, but the beams of energy struck only empty air. Shadows danced between the blasts, moving like liquid as if the darkness itself was alive. A voice, quiet and unshaken, echoed through the ruins. "You were never the hunters." Zorvek's blood ran cold. The human. It was still here. Watching. Waiting. It had led them here on purpose. He cursed under his breath. The Vorkesh had never lost a hunt. They had crushed empires, slaughtered resistance fighters, wiped civilizations from existence. Yet here, on this dead world, they were nothing more than prey. A sharp wind howled through the ruins, but the air was still. Another soldier collapsed. Then another. Zorvek could see them falling, but he couldn't see who was doing it. The human wasn't just a soldier, it was a predator. It didn't need brute force or superior numbers. It understood fear. And it was using it like a weapon. He took a slow breath. "Think, Zorvek. Think." His enemy was fast, yes, but it was still flesh and blood. It could be killed. If he could find it, if he could just see it, then he could end this nightmare. He reached for his wrist device, activating a thermal scan. Dominion technology was unmatched. Nothing could hide from its sensors. But when the readings came back, his stomach twisted. The human wasn't alone. All around them, countless figures flickered on the display. Impossible numbers. More than the soldiers who had landed here. More than the warships that had ever come to this sector. The ruins were filled with shapes silent, unmoving, watching. His warriors saw the readings, and for the first time, Zorvek saw true fear in their eyes. "What are they?" Rethor whispered. A soldier turned, panicked, trying to flee, but before he could take a step, something ripped him into the dark. No sound. No struggle. Just gone. The others backed closer together, forming a desperate circle, weapons shaking in their hands. "Commander," another warrior hissed, his voice sharp with terror, "we have to retreat." Zorvek's pride rebelled against the thought. The Vorkesh never fled. But this was no ordinary battle. He swallowed his fury, lifting his wrist communicator. "Evac now," he ordered, his voice iron. "All surviving ships, prepare for immediate departure." The order was met with silence. Then, a single response crackled through. "There are no ships left, Commander." The words hit him like a hammer. He turned, looking up at the sky. The massive Dominion warships that had descended onto the planet were now nothing more than burning wrecks. They had been destroyed. Every single one. How? There had been no sound, no sign of attack. Yet they were gone, as if erased from existence. A new voice whispered through the ruins. "You should never run from a human. Because we never stop hunting." Zorvek felt something behind him. A shift in the air. He spun, weapon raised, but before he could fire, an unseen force struck him, sending him crashing to the ground. His vision blurred, his body refusing to obey. He could hear his warriors screaming, but they were distant now, fading one by one. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him was a figure standing over him, calm and unshaken. The human. And then, nothing. Darkness surrounded Zorvek. A suffocating, endless void where time lost meaning. He wasn't dead, at least, not yet. His body ached, his mind screamed for clarity, but he couldn't move. Something held him in place. His senses struggled to adjust, and slowly, painfully, the world came back into focus. He was lying on a cold stone floor, his armor dented, his weapon missing. The ruins loomed over him, their ancient carvings glowing faintly in the dim light. Shadows flickered along the walls, moving like whispers, as if the ruins themselves were alive. The silence was crushing. No voices, no footsteps, no trace of his soldiers. He was alone. A deep, unsettling feeling crawled up his spine. The Dominion had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, crushing empires, wiping out civilizations. They were the masters of war. But now, here on this forgotten planet, in the grasp of something unseen, he felt powerless. The Vorkesh, the hunters of the Dominion, had become the hunted. A sound echoed through the ruins, a slow, deliberate footstep. Zorvek tensed, his instincts roaring to life. He forced himself upright, muscles protesting, his claws curling into fists. His eyes darted across the shadows, searching, waiting. Then, the figure stepped forward. It was the human. Unlike before, it did not hide. It walked with calm, unshaken confidence, its movements precise, controlled. The armor it wore was battered but strong, marked with symbols that Zorvek did not recognize. Its face was concealed beneath a dark visor, but there was no doubt in his mind it was watching him. Studying him. Waiting. Zorvek's voice came out as a growl. "What are you?" The human didn't answer. Instead, it gestured toward the ancient carvings on the walls, the strange symbols pulsing faintly with an eerie glow. "You don't know, do you?" The voice was quiet, unreadable. "You don't know where you are." Zorvek gritted his teeth. A dead world. A relic of the past. The human chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "No. Not dead. Forgotten." It turned, running a gloved hand along the stone. The Dominion wipes out history. Erases entire species. But not all of them disappear. Some wait. Zorvek narrowed his eyes. Wait for what? The human tilted its head slightly. For the right moment. A sharp tension filled the air. Zorvek's mind raced. The Dominion had no records of this world. No knowledge of its past. But the human spoke as if it knew something deeper, something ancient. The carvings, strange, unreadable, before began to shift in his vision, their meanings unraveling in his mind. He saw battlefields, warriors standing against impossible odds. Not just humans, but others long extinct species, all fighting side by side. And at the center of it all, leading them, were humans. A terrible realization settled in his chest. This isn't your first war. The human nodded. No, it isn't. Zorvek clenched his jaw. The Dominion believed humans to be a young race, newly emerged into the stars. But if this was true, if what he was seeing was real, then humanity had fought before. Not just in recent wars, but in wars so old that even the Dominion, with its vast records, had no knowledge of them. The air grew heavier, pressing down on him like a weight. The ruins whispered around them, their carvings pulsing brighter. Images flashed in Zorvek's mind, memories that were not his own. A war beyond time. An enemy that devoured civilizations. A battle fought in the shadows, unseen, erased from history. His breathing quickened. Who were you fighting? The human's visor gleamed under the dim light. Something worse than you. A shiver ran through Zorvek's body. The Dominion had always believed itself to be the ultimate power, the masters of the galaxy. But standing here, in the ruins of something older, something hidden, he realized the truth. The Dominion was not the first empire to rise, and it would not be the last to fall. A low hum filled the air, and suddenly the shadows moved. The darkness slithered across the walls, forming shapes, figures, watching, waiting. The same figures that had taken his soldiers. The ones that had remained unseen, hidden beneath the surface of reality. Zorvek's claws tightened. What are they? The human exhaled slowly. The real enemy. A deep, guttural sound echoed through the ruins, like a voice speaking from beyond time itself. The shadows twisted, taking form tall, humanoid figures with elongated limbs and hollow, empty eyes. The air trembled with their presence. "They were here long before your dominion," the human continued. "Long before humans, even. We fought them once. And we barely won." Zorvek's breath hitched. "You mean you didn't destroy them?" The human's gaze didn't waver. "You can't destroy the dark." The figures took a step forward. Then another. The ruins trembled beneath them, the carvings pulsing like a heartbeat. Zorvek could feel it now: hunger. The same hunger that had consumed entire species before. The same hunger that had wiped this world from history. The Dominion had walked into something far greater than a simple battle. They had walked into a war that never ended. Zorvek's mind screamed for an answer, a way out, but deep down, he knew. There was no running from this. There was no retreat. The Dominion had thought itself invincible, but against this, against an enemy that had fought since the beginning of time itself, they were nothing. The human took a step forward, standing between Zorvek and the advancing darkness. "You want to survive?" The voice was steady, unwavering. "Then you fight." Zorvek swallowed. He had spent his entire life hunting, conquering, destroying. But for the first time, he understood. The Dominion was not the greatest force in the universe. It was simply next on the list. And as the shadows struck, as the ruins shook with the force of an ancient battle reigniting, Zorvek knew one thing with absolute certainty: this was only the beginning. The ruins trembled under the weight of the unseen force, the air thick with something ancient, something powerful. Zorvek stood frozen, his body tense, his mind racing through every possible escape route, but there was none. The shadows moved like living nightmares, shifting between the cracks of reality itself, growing stronger with every passing second. His warriors were gone, consumed by the darkness, and now only he remained. He had faced wars, destroyed civilizations, crushed rebellions with his own hands. Yet here, in this forgotten place, he felt powerless. The human stood beside him, unmoving. There was no fear, no hesitation, only a cold, quiet readiness, as if it had always known this moment would come. Zorvek didn't understand. The Dominion had ruled the galaxy for centuries, but this was something beyond war. The shadows weren't just enemies. They were something far worse. A force that had existed before recorded time. A hunger that could never be satisfied. A deep, guttural sound echoed from the darkness, a whisper that crawled into his mind like a sickness. His vision blurred for a moment, and he saw glimpses: entire worlds devoured, species erased, civilizations wiped from existence without a trace. His own people, the mighty Vorkesh, had thought themselves the ultimate hunters. But now, standing on the edge of oblivion, he finally understood. The real hunters had just been waiting. "You feel it now, don't you?" the human said quietly. Its voice was calm, steady. The truth. Zorvek clenched his fists, his claws digging into his palms. "What are they?" His voice was barely a whisper, but the weight of the question crushed him. The human turned its head slightly, the dark visor reflecting the shifting shadows. "The end of all things." The figures in the darkness moved faster now, their hollow eyes locked onto them. The ruins trembled harder, the very fabric of reality beginning to bend under the sheer force of their presence. Zorvek could feel it: the pull of something endless, something that didn't just kill but erased. The Dominion's greatest fear wasn't defeat. It was being forgotten. And that was exactly what these creatures did. The human reached for its weapon, a long, jagged blade pulsing with blue energy. Not a standard human weapon. Something older. Something forged for a battle that had been fought before. It lifted the blade in one hand, motioning toward the carvings on the wall. "This place isn't just ruins," it said. "It's a battlefield. And a graveyard." Zorvek's mind reeled. A graveyard of what? The human finally turned its head toward him. The last army that stood against them. A shiver ran down Zorvek's spine. He had thought this planet was just another forgotten world, but now he saw the truth. This was where the war had ended last time. And if they failed here, it would end again with the galaxy itself being swallowed whole. A terrible sound filled the air, something that was neither a scream nor a roar, but something in between. The shadows lunged. Zorvek reacted purely on instinct, dodging to the side as a black claw slashed through the air where he had just stood. He struck back with his own claws, expecting resistance, but there was none. His attack passed through the creature as if it were smoke, and yet he could feel something watching, something calculating. The human moved differently. It didn't hesitate. It struck with precision, its blade slicing into the darkness, and for the first time, the shadows recoiled. The creatures could be hurt, but only with the right weapon. Zorvek snarled. "How do we kill them?" "You don't," the human said, slicing through another figure. "You hold the line." "Hold the line." Zorvek had never held the line. The Dominion did not defend it, conquered. But now, for the first time, there was no conquest, no victory waiting at the end. Only survival. The ruins erupted into chaos. The shadows poured forward like a flood, and Zorvek fought with everything he had. Claws, brute strength, anything that could keep them at bay. The human moved beside him, its blade striking true every time, carving through the darkness like a beacon of light. But the creatures did not stop. They did not tire. They were endless. Zorvek's muscles burned. He had never fought like this before. No strategy, no formations, just raw, desperate survival. His breath was ragged, his body pushed beyond its limits. The human fought without stopping, without slowing, but even it could not last forever. Then, something changed. The carvings along the ruins pulsed brighter, their glow spreading across the stone. The ground trembled not from the enemy, but from something beneath. The human paused for half a second, looking around. "It's waking up," it muttered. Zorvek's chest heaved. "What is?" The human didn't answer. It just grabbed his arm and yanked him backward as the ground split apart beneath them. A surge of energy erupted from the ruins, a blinding light swallowing the battlefield. The shadows screamed not in rage, but in fear. They began to retreat, pulling back into the cracks of the ruins, vanishing into the void as the ancient light consumed them. Zorvek collapsed to one knee, his body trembling from exhaustion. The battlefield was silent again. The ruins, once filled with death, now pulsed with something different. The human stood over him, its blade still humming softly. "This place wasn't just a graveyard," it said. "It was a weapon." Zorvek looked up, his breathing heavy. "And what did we just do?" The human exhaled slowly. "We turned it back on." A deep rumbling sound echoed beneath them, something shifting in the depths of the planet. The shadows had fled for now, but they would return. They always did. But this time, something had changed. This time, the enemy had been forced to retreat. And in war, even the smallest victory could change everything. Zorvek forced himself to stand. His mind was still reeling, but one thing was clear. The war was not over. He looked at the human, his voice steady despite the exhaustion. "What happens now?" The human sheathed its blade. "Now?" It turned, staring out into the endless darkness beyond the ruins. "Now we make our last stand." And as the ruins pulsed with new life, as the galaxy stood on the edge of an unseen war, Zorvek knew one thing with absolute certainty: this battle was only the beginning. The air inside the Dominion warship was heavy with tension. Zorvek sat in silence, his mind replaying the battle over and over. The shadows, the ruins, the ancient war, everything he had believed about the galaxy had been shattered in a single moment. The Dominion had always considered itself the supreme power, unchallenged and undefeatable. But now he knew the truth. There was something greater, something older, and worst of all, something the Dominion had no knowledge of. The human sat across from him, calm as ever. Its armor was scratched, its blades still faintly humming with the energy of the ancient battlefield. It had fought with him, saved him, even when it had no reason to. Zorvek didn't understand it. Why would a human, a member of a species the Dominion had barely considered a threat, choose to stand against a force even the most powerful empires had failed to defeat? "You're thinking too much," the human finally spoke, breaking the silence. I can see it on your face. Zorvek let out a slow breath, his claws tapping against the metal table between them. I don't understand you, he admitted. Your kind. Your war. Your purpose. The human leaned forward slightly, resting its arms on the table. What don't you understand? Zorvek narrowed his eyes. The Dominion conquers. It dominates. It survives because we never stop hunting, never stop growing stronger. But you humans, you fight wars you can't win. You take risks that make no sense. You throw yourselves into battles where you should be crushed, and yet he hesitated. And yet you survive. The human smirked, a flicker of amusement crossing its face. You think survival is about being the strongest? Zorvek growled. Isn't it? The human shook its head. No. Strength alone doesn't win wars. The ones who think like that, they fall first. It gestured toward the vastness of space beyond the ship's window. Zorvek leaned back, arms crossed. You think knowledge is more powerful than strength? The human nodded. Knowledge is survival. You fight with brute force, but we fight with something more. We adapt. We learn. Every time we fall, we come back stronger. Its eyes darkened behind the visor. And when we do strike back, we never make the same mistake twice. A silence stretched between them. Zorvek felt something unsettling in those words, something that sent a chill through his core. The Dominion had never needed to adapt. It had always been the predator, never the prey. But if the human was right, if its species truly learned from every battle, every defeat, then humanity wasn't just a species. It was an unstoppable force. You're afraid, the human observed. I can see it, Zorvek snarled. The Dominion fears nothing. The human tilted its head. That's the problem. You should. Zorvek's claws dug into the table. And what lesson am I supposed to learn from you? The human leaned forward, its voice almost a whisper. That the real danger in this galaxy isn't the strongest empire. It's the one that refuses to die. Zorvek exhaled sharply. He hated to admit it, but the human's words made sense. The Dominion crushed its enemies, erased entire civilizations, but in doing so, it had never prepared for something like humanity. Something that could lose a war and still win in the end. The doors to the war room opened, and an officer stepped inside. Commander Zorvek, we have detected movement in the sector. A fleet human vessels. Zorvek's eyes snapped to the human, but it showed no surprise. No panic. It had known this was coming. How many ships? Zorvek asked. The officer hesitated. Just one. Zorvek's brow furrowed. One? The human chuckled. You don't need a fleet to win a war. You just need the right weapon. A sharp tension filled the air. Zorvek had fought countless battles, but this time, something was different. The Dominion had always been in control, always dictated the terms of war. But now, sitting across from this human, watching the slow, knowing smile on its face, he realized the lesson had already begun. And he wasn't sure if the Dominion would survive it.